Hello everyone and welcome back to the JavaFX course. Today is part 3, Animation in Practice. Essentially, we're going to learn about how we can actually use animations and when we should or shouldn't use them in order to make our applications look much nicer and improve the overall user experience. So the best way to do this is through practice, and I've already went ahead and created a simple profile UI picture of a person. So we're going to go ahead and practice by animating this entire user interface and trying to make a nice user experience. So first off, let's think about what features we can add to this. We have a profile picture over here, and we might want to add a feature in which the user can change their profile picture. So let's go ahead and think back to how some other websites do this same feature. For example, Facebook doesn't actually have a separate button that says update your profile picture. Instead, all you need to do is move your mouse over the profile picture and a button appears over it, like an overlay that says update your profile picture, and you can click that instead. And animations can make this a whole lot nicer. Instead of jarringly having a random button appear out of nowhere, if it animates nice into this frame, it'll look a lot easier and feel comfortable to the user. So what we're going to do is animate in a button. Let's fade it in for now, so that when your mouse enters this pane, the button fades in and the user can click on it. So I went ahead and created a little button that overlays over it. If I run it now, you can see it looks like this. And so we're going to be switching between the two states with a fade animation. So you've probably went over this already, and if you've guessed correctly, it's a fade transition that we're going to be using. So let's go ahead and code it up. So all I'm going to do is add in an event handler to the profile button and add the animation whenever the mouse enters the button. And so we're first going to create a new fade transition, and we're going to pass in a duration. And let's just make it, let's say 0.2 seconds. If you remember, you can use the duration class to pass in seconds or milliseconds of time. And we're going to be animating the profile button. Next off, I can just say the from value is going to be 0 because it's initially going to be empty. And then the set to value to be 1 because it's going to be fading in. And all we need to do is play it. And we need to do the exact same thing for when the mouse leaves. So I'm just going to copy this in to that on mouse exited, and we're going to swap these two so it's from 1 and goes out to 0. So if I run it now, we should already have a really nice interaction, so that way when I hover over the profile picture, the user knows that they can update their profile picture by clicking on it. Now, the other really nice place to add in user interface animations is when an app first loads up. You could have it so that the content is static and is automatically present when you load it up, but it would be nice to have the elements individually animate in. For example, you could have a simple fade transition so that the screen is initially empty and all the elements fade on. But let's try something a bit more complex. Let's make these elements fade in from outside of the pane, so it looks like they came from somewhere else. For example, this profile image view, let's make it animate in from the left, from over here. The title and subtitle, we can animate it in from the top, and these photo and follower labels, we can make them animate from the bottom. And so this is actually relatively simple. I'm going to go ahead and create a new function called animate UI, and create the function here. And so let's first think about how exactly we want to do this. One thing is that we don't want the animation to play as soon as the user opens up the app, because that's jarring and they might not even notice that it occurred. So what we're going to do is wait for a second after the app loads and then play the animations. And you're probably thinking that we can use a pause transition for this, and that's exactly right. Now for the other animations, they're all different, but we're going to want them to occur at the same time. And a parallel transition is perfect for that. So because we want a pause and a parallel to occur in sequence, we're going to need to use a sequential transition. So the first thing we want is a parallel transition for all the different elements to fade in. So I'll just go ahead and create one right now. And we also need a sequential transition. So next off, because for the parallel transition, all the elements are going to be fading in at the same time, let's go ahead and create a duration variable now so that we can reuse it again and again. And let's just say maybe about 0.4 seconds. So first off, let's create the pause. Pause is very simple, it's just a pause transition. And let's pass in a time of maybe about set duration, let's say 1 second. Next off, let's start off with our first real animation, the translation of the image. So first what we want to do is actually move the stack pane outside. This image and button is actually a stack pane with a combination of the two. What I'm going to do is just play stack pane, and I'm going to set the translation to anywhere outside this pane. So I'll say maybe about -300. Now that we've actually set it to be outside, we can go ahead and animate it back in. So let's just say, let's create a new translate transition, and I'm just going to call it transition 1. And I'm going to say that the from value will be -300, where we originally set it to. Then the set 2x will be 0, back to the original starting position. And we're going to say that the duration is going to be that duration variable we made previously. And we're going to set the actual node to be our stack pane. And so this will translate our entire pane from the left into the center. So next off, let's go ahead and animate in the title label. And that's actually very similar to what we've already done, so we can go ahead and copy this. All we need to do is just change out the variables and change this from an X to a Y, because we're going to be animating it from the top. And instead of 300, since it's closer, let's just make it 200. We're going to change this to transition number 2. And that's it. Now you've probably already noticed that this is very repetitive and pretty boring. So I've already went ahead and created the rest of the code. It's very simple. It's the exact same code, except we're swapping out some of the values and the variable names. Now that we've done all of that, we can actually add all of these transitions into the main parallel transition. We can get the children and then add all. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And next off, we can add these again to the sequential transition that we had. So this one, we're just going to add in the pause transition and then add in the parallel transition to go right after that. All it's left to do is just hit play. So let's check it out. And ta-da, we have a nice animation that brings in all the elements from the outside and looks really nice to the user. So you're probably wondering, how can we solve this problem of this extremely repetitive code for every single element? Well, because some of this code is very similar, I went ahead and created a library that you can use called Sprint Animation. Sprint is really simple to use, and we're going to try it out right now. What we're going to do is condense all of this code. It's about 60 lines or so, into just around 10. So to use Sprint, you can just go ahead and download it. It's a jar file, and you can get it at the GitHub link that I'll post in the description. And you just need to add it in to your project as a library. So I'm going to comment out this animate UI function, and we're going to replace it with an animate sprint method. Go ahead and create it right here. Public void animate sprint. Now with this, you're going to find it to be much easier and much more fun to use. So the first thing that we need to use with Sprint is you need to create an instance of the Sprint class. We're just going to say sprint equals new sprint, and you need to pass in the first node that you want to animate. For example, if you remember, our image was a stack pane, so I'm going to pass that in. And the first thing we had was a pause transition. So instead of this stuff right over here, it's very simple. All we need to say is sprint dot wait, and we pass in the duration. We can say 1.0 seconds. And that's it. We've created the entire sprint transition with just one word, wait. Now after that, again, let's go ahead and create a duration value that we can reuse. This time I'm just going to make it 0.8 seconds. And so this is where it gets pretty cool. So all I need to do first is say sprint dot, and all the functions are built in. Stuff like move from and move to, rotate from, rotate to, fade, all that stuff is already in there. So for example, if I want to move it from the left, all we have to say is move from. I'm going to put in the duration. Then I'm going to say the x value, which was -300, 0 for y because we're not moving it in the y direction. And that's it. That was literally all there was to it. So this entire translate image code, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code, is now just one line. You can do the same thing with all the other stuff. Now if you want to swap between nodes, for example, we're with the stack pane, but now we want to switch to the title label, all we need to do is say set node. So now we can just type in title label, you can say dot, and the same thing. Move from. This time we're animating the y property, so we can just put in duration and 0 for the x, and -200. And this is how easy this is to use. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this for the other stuff. So we have the subtitle label, we have the photo label, the followers label, and if you remember, the photo label and followers label are followers label being animated from the bottom, so I'll make those positive. And at the end, when you actually want to play it, we just say sprint dot sprint. And that's it. We've created this entire chunk of code in just this tiny function right here. Now another cool bonus function that Sprint has is some cool interpolators. And so it has some interpolators that aren't built in, and you can have a lot of fun with this. So you can say sprint.set interpolator, sprint interpolators dot, and then this you have this list of different things you can choose from, and there's some pretty fun stuff. For example, let's say elastic makes it like a rubber band. If I run it, see, it looks like that. It looks pretty fun, right? And then there's another one. If I say bounce, that'll make it look like it's bouncing on the stuff. Yeah, like that. There's a lot of different stuff that you can play with and use, and these look much nicer than the default ones that come with JavaFX. So for just a brief overview on how exactly Sprint works, by default, whenever you use any transition in Sprint, like move from, it's automatically going to be added to a parallel transition. But let's say you want a sequential transition, you can use .wait, and if you want, you can add in a time, but if you just want it to be a regular sequence, you can use 0.0. And so essentially this will all of this will complete first, and then the second sequence will run afterwards. And you can even use like multiple instances of Sprint for really complex animations where you want to do a bunch of different stuff at the same time. But essentially with Sprint, it simplifies both parallel and sequential transitions together, and you can create pretty complex stuff in very few lines. So you might want to consider using Sprint because, as you can see, it condenses a lot of your code, and it'll let you make really nice animations for your users that'll keep things interesting and look really cool and set you apart from other apps. So that was it for this lesson. I hope you learned some cool stuff about animation, and I hope you use it in your own apps. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next lesson.